Welcome back to my channel Check the Facts, where you are sure to find topics that will make all the hotheads out there fume with rage, entitlement, offense, outrage, and a hotbed of doughy, marshmallowy feelings seeping through their pores. And yet I still find myself quite comfortable in taking on the topics that they are too chicken to really check the facts on, add weight to their words, and back up their claims. The topic for this video is that there are only two genders, so I set out to prove this in the best way that I can. This video could easily have been hours long, but in order to keep it short, I'm only going to touch on each topic that I've listed. After I stop talking, and this video officially starts, I added a table of contents, because throughout my research in this, I found 17 categories to go through, although I'm sure there's more. I'm quickly going to say something about each to keep this video short, and as always, my sources are in the description box with links in full detail. I add these sources so you can see where I get my information from. The whole point of the videos I make is not to tell you what to believe. I want you guys to look into the stuff I tell you, and this includes documents you cannot get online. So take initiative and look. Okay, so there are only two genders. It is not a social construct completely, it is tied in with your sex at birth. I have more to say about transgenders in this video because of the physical implications as opposed to multigenders who believe they're a fish or a lamb or a cow or some spirit, because that's more psychological. But I will touch on that too. I do want to say one thing though before we start. When people set their mind to believing something, no matter how much proof is out there of the opposite, they will still continue to believe what they want. I'm starting this off with a clip from The Fallen State. It's just a 1-minute clip and then it'll go straight to the table of contents.
So you still feel like a woman?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that doesn't change.
And so you feel feminine?
Sure, yeah, of course. And I think now, my feeling now is that gender is evolving. Like, I kind of used to be closed, believe it or not, even look at me now, you would never guess, but I used to be closed-minded myself about gender, and I thought it had to be man, woman, or trans. But now there's like 1,000 different genders, so a person can be gender fluid. It's not even now, it's always been, but now people have names for it and can describe it. So I don't put myself now in a box. I'm definitely transgender. I'm definitely in that category. But sometimes, like in my dating life, for example,
I really like this guy's hair, and my ADD just kicked in, and the sequin on that top just took all my attention. Did you notice all the charts that were being shown while he was talking? It's ridiculous the amount of genders that are now out there. Once upon a time, it used to be LGBT. Then it went to LGBTQ. Then more letters kept getting added on, and now I think they ran out of letters. So they'll probably resort to using gibberish and symbols. Now it's like LGBTQ, RSVWXY, Kappa, Zeta, 1579, Mishi Wishi, Bloop Bloop, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Homosexuality has more credibility than these people do because this is getting out of hand. There is just absolutely no more credibility for these people. It's this ridiculous. Let's just get into this before I get a nosebleed. Some of you may have seen this from ABC News, a list of 58 genders. And what's two-spirit? Sounds like a Native American spiritual thing, not a gender problem. I bet you guys thought that's it, but there's more. I mean, look at all this stuff. Airy fluid? What's that? I'm not even going to read it. Bat gender, really. Border gender? Bogger gender? Kale gender? What else? Caboose gender? Oh my goodness, circa gender. Wait, still reading. Crypto gender, dome gender, element gender, fae gender, fist gender, flower gender. These are really funny. Going all the way down, this is all alphabetical order. This is a massive list. Mutogender, novigender, non-binary, well there's one I saw, or no, stratogender, tachygender, really, ungender, vestigender, Zoe, I don't even know what Zoe is. In the Essentials of Psychiatric Mental Health Nursing, gender dysphoria, previously known as gender identity disorder, is now suddenly called a difference rather than a disorder. Though the funny thing is that this is still put in a mental health book, in a chapter on disorders. And it contradicts itself because it says that it's not a disorder, but other than being in a chapter on disorders, if you keep reading, everything in here points to a disorder. It involves persistent, strong cross-gender identification. The person feels he or she is a different gender than that indicated by his or her physiology. A person with gender dysphoria believes that he or she was born in the wrong body. They possess a strong and persistent desire to assume the characteristics of who he or she wants to be. But you know who else has this? People with dissociative identity disorder or personality disorders. These people can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 personalities. So don't tell me this is not a disorder. There's such a thing as transvestic disorder. It means deriving sexual gratification by dressing as a person of the opposite gender. Notice that it says gender, not opposite sex, because gender and sex at birth are tied in together, which is actually clarified in this next part. Look at this. So unlike gender dysphoria, which involves a conflict between one's beliefs about true gender and biological gender, or the gender assigned by society. So gender is biological, and it has a little bit to do with society as well. Not completely, not 100%, just like people say that gender is a societal construct. It is not. It is tied with biology. Anyway, the transvestite does not perceive a conflict with gender, but enjoys dressing in a gender incongruent manner. Look at the nursing diagnoses that apply to gender dysphoria. Anxiety, compromised family coping, ineffective relationship, risk for injury, low self-esteem, sexual dysfunction, ineffective sexuality pattern, risk for other directed violence, and social isolation. And these are just a few. In medical surgical nursing, in the first paragraph of LGBT, at the very end, the last sentence, it says discrimination against LGBT people has been associated with high rates of psychiatric disorders, substance abuse, and suicide. By the way, no, that is a lie, and I will disprove that later in this video. The one thing I noticed about these new medical books is on topics like LGBT and religion, they tend to sugarcoat some things. It's rare, but you'll still find something stupid that's being written in there in order to not offend some people. And unfortunately, this has taken on a bigger role when it comes to doctor visits by multigenders and transgenders. But next paragraph, it says, lesbian women are more likely to be obese when compared with their heterosexual counterparts. Lesbian and bisexual women have increased risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Gay men have higher rates of human immunodeficiency virus, that's HIV, and hepatitis infections than other groups. Gay men and lesbian women have higher smoking rates than heterosexuals. And then it goes on to talk about the barriers that these people face. Sex at birth refers to the biological differences between males and females. For example, chromosomes, XX and XY, reproductive organs, ovaries and testes, hormones, estrogen and testosterone. Gender refers to the cultural differences expected by society/culture of men and women according to their sex. Because I got this out of Simply Psychology, this says that gender is a society thing, whereas my mental health book said that gender is a biology thing. So you're going to see this disparity between the definition of gender. And even though this website says that gender is a society thing, I'm actually going to show you in this video that it's not only a society thing. It is rooted in biology. This is my anatomy and physiology monster of a binder. It is over 3 inches big, and it came in hardcover format, but I wanted the binder because I could easily take pages out. And I am not exaggerating, I cried when I had to take anatomy. And then physiology. This stuff was intense, it was hard, it was massive. I even questioned myself so many times why I even got into this. And it always came back to the same answer. So I can know something more. Anatomy is the study of the structure and form. Physiology is the study of function of the body. They work hand in hand. You take anatomy, then you take physiology. And the reason I wanted to show you these definitions is because people actually studied this stuff. They make it their life's ambition and worth to study the human body, any body really, animal, people, whatever. And they do hardcore research with a team by themselves, however they see fit. And in turn, we learn from them. There are a lot of people who put their time and effort into putting this anatomy and physiology book together. And there are people out there who believe in multigenders and say that science has no place in the multigender community because science is not completely true and that feelings have more value and worth than science does. But ignoring them, gametogenesis is the process of forming human sex cells called gametes. Female gametes are secondary oocytes, commonly referred to as an egg, whereas male gametes are sperm. This process begins with meiosis. This is to tell you that only one man and one woman can reproduce. You can call yourself whatever gender you want, but at the end of the day, the reality is that a man and a woman can reproduce. Like God intended, like nature intended. There is no other way. I even had to study a little bit of obstetrics. And even with today's modern technology, something from a man and something from a woman is still needed to reproduce. Autosomes have genes that code for cellular function. The cell is the smallest unit of life. Don't mistake it for the atom, which is the smallest unit of matter. That's something else. So autosomes determine characteristics like eye color or hair color or height or skin. A pair of chromosomes consists of either an X or an X and Y. And these will determine if you are male or female, because a female has two X chromosomes and a male has an X and Y. And of course there's intersex conditions, which I will talk about later on in this video, but I wanted to show you this so that you know that I am very much aware that there are some problems in nature, but this is very, very rare. And I will give you the statistics on that too. Activists for multigender, any gender, have a subjective worldview according to this article. And what subjective means is that it's based on their opinion, what they see through their eyes and what they feel. It's not objective, it's not unbiased. Here it says they claim that the real self is something other than the physical body, in a new form of Gnostic dualism, yet at the same time they embrace a materialistic philosophy in which only the material world exists. They say that gender is purely a social construct while asserting that a person can be trapped in the wrong gender. So after reading that paragraph, I asked myself, how can you be trapped in the wrong gender if gender is a social construct? There's a first mistake. Continuing, they say there are no meaningful differences between man and woman, yet they rely on rigid sex stereotypes to argue that gender identity is real, while human embodiment is not. They claim that truth is whatever a person says it is, yet they believe there's a real self to be discovered inside that person. Let's just dissect this paragraph for a minute, starting with the first sentence. There's no meaningful differences between man and woman. If there was no meaningful difference, then I can tell you that you would not be existing today, because there is a difference, and that difference equals your reproduction. The gender wage gap. If there's truly no difference between a man and a woman, and there's all kinds of genders, why is there a gender wage gap argument? By the way, that has been debunked. Do not believe it. I go over that in detail in my video, The New F Word, and it's insulting. Go to my channel and check that out. There is an age restriction on it though. Another argument is feminism. Why is there still feminism if there's not two genders? This is just complete lunacy. They can't even argue their position. And the rest of the sentence is a complete mess. There's no meaningful difference between man and woman. Gender identity is real, but human embodiment is not. This is like, I'm saying this, but then I'm saying the opposite, but then I'm saying this again. This is just a complete mess. Truth is whatever a person says it is. Then I can easily claim I'm 120 years old and I should have access to whatever documents to change my age to 120 years old. Not only that, but that I have blue skin. Why can't I have blue skin? If you can be a bat gender or a two-spirit, I can have blue skin. But then they look at someone like me and they say, no, that's not true because you don't have blue skin. Well, you know what? I say you are not two-spirit or cactus spirit. You are exactly what you were born as, a girl or a boy. In the next sentence, it says they promote a radical expressive individualism in which people are free to do whatever they want and define the truth however they wish. Yet they try to enforce transgender ideology. And that's what bothers me the most. If they believe that they want to be fish or trees or whatever, why does it have to be enforced on the rest of society? The normal people. In fact, the majority of the population. They say they're inclusive, but they're not inclusive. They're only inclusive as long as you believe what they believe. You will be unhappy to know that that was all just the intro. If I really had the time to go over all of this, this could easily take me quite a few hours. But I am merciful. Then I guess that was the official introduction, not the official video. Here's the official video. Sex reassignment doesn't work. Here's the evidence. This guy can really write. Not only can he really write, he can really research. Ryan T. Anderson. McHugh is another guy mentioned in this article. He says that sex change is impossible and it proves not easy nor wise to live in a counterfeit sexual garb. And the question is why? So Ryan T. Anderson puts it bluntly, sex is a bodily reality that can be recognized well before birth with ultrasound imaging. The sex of an organism is defined and identified by the way in which he or she is recognized for sexual reproduction. It meaning he or she. Further down it says that this one part, this one feature that tells if you are a boy or a girl, a male or a female, is just one part of many, many parts or features of an organism. Reading further, it says male and female organisms have different parts that are functionally integrated for the sake of their whole. What this means is, taking the male body for example, he is declared male at birth. He has male parts, and these male parts work in conjunction with one another for the benefit and good of the whole, meaning the whole body. It is made and tailored specifically to him, designed so that he can work and function as a male. Same thing with a female. Now, you can operate on certain specific parts of the body, but you are destroying the body as a whole because there's a whole lot going on in the body than just the outward appearance. You can cut off your private parts and then exchange them for something else because you want to be something else. You can add into your body, but you are actually destroying the whole entire function of your body. In the long run, you are going to pay dearly for this because this is not natural and the body is getting hurt. Here's one of the professional morons I mentioned earlier, Deanna Atkins. She says, from a medical perspective, the appropriate determinant of sex is gender identity, which is so stupid. From a medical perspective, I can't believe she even has a degree in anything. Nobody in the medical field will ever say something as stupid as this. She argues that gender identity is not only the preferred basis for determining sex, but the only medically supported determinant of sex. I have never seen this medically supported anywhere, ever. Every other method is bad science. I seriously think she is high or mental because this is not normal. This is not normal on her part. It is counter to medical science to use chromosomes, hormones, internal reproductive organs, external genitalia, or secondary sex characteristics to override gender identity for purposes of classifying someone as male or female. Yet gender is embedded in biology. And hold on, I am getting to that. And yes, I am so sorry to say that people like her actually exist. They walk among us. In this article, what science really has to say about sexuality and gender, Lawrence S. Mayer and Paul R. McHugh decided to publish a 143-page report in the New Atlantis, which, and it's quoted here, offers a careful summary and an up-to-date explanation of many of the most rigorous findings produced by the biological, psychological, and social sciences related to sexual orientation and gender identity. And anyone who's watched my videos before would know that I would absolutely look into this and also give you this report. And I have it. Here's the PDF. I looked over it, I read it, and I strongly advise that you guys just take the time to read it too. It's with the rest of my sources. So I'm actually going to be going over the main points that are included in this article rather than going over the entire PDF because it is so long. There's just no time for it. The first few points talks about sexual orientation and the definition, and they're just going to use the term sexual orientation because it's just so broad. Going down to the last point, longitudinal studies of adolescents suggest that sexual orientation may be quite fluid over the life course for some people, and that those who report same-sex attraction no longer do so as adults. I touch on this a little bit later in the video. Children are very prone to changes, especially because they are learning, they are developing, and they are copying, and they are doing the things that they see. So if children especially are going to be trained from infancy to believe something, they are going to believe it. It carries on into the teenage years, but by adulthood, you have your own mind. You can make up your mind to be whatever you want. The first point says that research suggests that while genetic or innate factors may influence the emergence of same-sex attractions, these biological factors cannot provide a complete explanation. Environmental and experiential factors may also play an important role. This means that you cannot blame biology for your inconsistencies when it comes to genders and what you believe in that topic. There absolutely is social influence. But in order to test this, and they did, look down at the third bullet point. The largest attempt to identify genetic variants associated with homosexuality, a study of over 23,000 individuals, found no linkage reaching genome-wide significance for same-sex sexual identity for males or females. Even further, it says the contribution of genetic factors is actually pretty modest, which means that it is very, very little. They even did studies of the brains of homosexuals and heterosexuals, which showed differences, but have not demonstrated that these differences are inborn rather than the result of environmental factors that influence both psychological and neurobiological traits. Then there's the environmental factors. Any kind of abuse can make someone turn to this kind of a lifestyle, and these next points talk about that. You can pause and read for yourself. Non-heterosexuals are about 2 to 3 times as likely to have experienced childhood sexual abuse than heterosexuals. In one major survey, only 1.2% of males who had spent their adolescence in a remote environment responded that they had had a male sexual partner in the year of the survey, while those who lived in the city were close to 4 times, which is 4.4%, more likely to report that they had had such an encounter. Mental health. Compared to the general population, non-heterosexual and transgender subpopulations have higher rates of mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and suicide, as well as behavioral and social problems such as substance abuse and intimate partner violence. And these are more of the statistics from the report. You can pause and read this, but I actually advise you to read the 143-page report. I know it sounds like a lot, but you don't actually have to do it in one sitting. These are all just a few points that were taken out of this report. Moving on to sexuality and suicide. Compared to heterosexuals, members of the non-heterosexual population are nearly 2.5 times the risk of suicide. And that's not because no one accepts them. This society is too accepting. So accepting, in fact, that they're making laws and rules for these people and forcing this acceptance upon us. So these people aren't killing themselves because of acceptance. Compared to the general population, adults who have undergone sex reassignment surgery continue to have a higher risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes. Gender identity. Here it says that the problem with gender is that it's not well defined, and I agree with this because, like I said, I could find somewhere where it says that gender is biological, but then somewhere else I'll find that gender is not biological, it's only social, but then somewhere else I'll find that it's both. The genetics of sex differences in brain and behavior. The abstract says that the way that men and women think and behave used to be because of gonadal hormone secretions, but new research they did shows the differences are mediated by mechanisms other than the action of these hormone secretions, and in particular by products of genes located on the X and Y chromosomes. And the reason I added this is because this is where gender comes in. Multigenders say that gender is a social construct, therefore it's only the people that influence this kind of thinking of what you like, what you want to choose, who you want to be, but it's not just that, it really is based in biology. And being born male or female does influence your thinking naturally. So being anything else other than male or female is a choice. And I will also discuss abnormalities later. And those are the very few and rare exceptions. And even those have nothing to do with the brain, they're physical. Okay, so there's the obvious biological differences in body. There's the height, the weight, the external appearance. There's the specific diseases each are susceptible to. But then there's the brain. These two and only two genders have similar but not identical brains. Pause this video and look at table 1 so you can see some of the differences in just this one table, or you can look at this in its entirety on my sources page, because I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you. Males and females exhibit different patterns of transmitting, regulating, and processing biomolecules. Table 2 shows the neurochemical differences in each one, focusing more on the monoaminergic system, which affects them differently. Monoamine oxidase is a chemical in the brain which is involved in controlling dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and histamine. Monoamine oxidase removes these neurotransmitters from the brain, so that's why drugs are given to help keep these neurotransmitters in the brain, like monoamine oxidase inhibitors. That's a drug class. You can look at this table yourself. Catecholamines are released by the adrenal glands, which usually in response to stress, which affects males and females differently. Dopamine activity is upregulated in males only, whereas norepinephrine is upregulated in females only. Tyrosine hydroxylase, which is involved in dopamine synthesis, is regulated by SRY, which is the male sex determination gene, and is not present in females. So besides biological differences, men and women differ in physiological and behavioral aspects too. Men perform better on mental rotation compared to women. Women perform better on specific verbal tasks compared to men. And there is also a very large sex difference in sexual interests and behaviors. Again, you can see the chart for yourself because I'm not going to go through it with you. Okay, now here's the punchline. If you guys decided to just see any of this stuff on your own, which I really hope you did because there's a lot more than what I just mentioned. I just casually skimmed through it with you. It says some contend that these differences are due to social systems and gender socialization. Researchers have examined what contributes to the differences we see between males and females. The last sentence concludes that social factors alone do not contribute to all differences seen between males and females, especially regarding biological differences. And then the rest of this goes into more anatomy, which again you can read yourself. Now what that last statement means is that it's not proving that transgenders then are truly living in the wrong body and I'm proving biology wrong or something. It's talking about social factors in terms of gender. What this entire article is explaining is that on the outside, you look either like a male or a female. That is the most noticeable part of what makes a male and a female who they are. But the second part, which is the gender, is embedded in the brain too. So people are wired to think as the gender that they were born to be. It's in their brain. There are differences. So even though you may be hopscotch gender, but you were born a boy, your brain is still wired to work as the brain of a boy. Those neurotransmitters will still work as they were wired to work. And your body as a whole, if you haven't altered it physically, will still work as that of a boy. The reason you are hopscotch gender is because you choose it. Because your DNA, the blueprint of your physical identity, will still always be a boy. Anything else is mental. It is in your mind, it is your choice, it is verbal, it is anything but physical. Don't believe me? Well, let's just look at this next statement. Recently, it was found that gonadal hormones might not be the sole contributor to male and female typical development. Genes encoded on the sex chromosomes that directly act on the brain to influence neural development and sex-specific behaviors have been identified. So chromosomes X or XY are linked to your brain to contribute to your brain thinking like either a male or a female. Nothing else. So are gender feminists and transgender activists undermining science? Gender feminists, who are distinct from traditional equity feminists, refuse to acknowledge the role of evolution, notice how it's underlined, in shaping the human brain, and instead promote the idea that sex differences are caused by a socialization process that begins at birth. But notice how they're called feminists. Their credibility is lost before they even begin to speak. They claim that gender is a construct and we are born as a blank slate, blah, blah, blah. They also claim that our brains are identical, which I just showed in the previous articles that our brains are not identical. Studies have documented the masculinizing effect of prenatal testosterone on the developing brain. And a recent study in the journal Nature Scientific Reports showed that testosterone exposure alters the programming of neural stem cells responsible for brain growth and sex differences. So of course, I had to look into this report, and here it is. Once again, it talks about how gonadal hormone exposure causes a male and a female to think the way they each do. And because these gender feminists don't like any research that goes against their own ideology, they use an example from one study that claims it is impossible to tell apart male and female brains. Because if you could tell apart male and female brains, that means that you would have to admit that there are only males and only females, and that can't be possible with these feminists. Ha, feminists. I wonder if they realize that feminism has to do with the female gender. But a group of researchers decided to reanalyze this data, and so far it started with 69% to 77% accuracy. And here it is. You can pause and read it for yourself. In another study published in 2016, a year later, researchers used a larger sample in conjunction with higher resolution neuroimaging and were able to successfully classify a brain by its sex 93% of the time. And here it is. And then this goes on to reiterate what I just said in the previous article about the differences in brains, that there's a difference between men and women in cognitive domains, including verbal fluency and mental rotation. The study was done using an MRI, and it showed how women outperform men or men outperform women. Here's the MRI report so you can read for yourselves. Again, the difference in the brain that you can tell it's male or female, and it has to do with the X chromosome or XY. The writer then says that these people are willing to agree that there are neurological sex differences, but they would only agree to that in private because if they ever publicly acknowledge this, then it would justify the female gender. I'm paraphrasing. And this next sentence is the best one I have read so far. Distortion of science hinders progress. When gender feminists start refuting basic biology, people stop listening and the larger point about equality is lost. And I agree. I just don't want to listen anymore because to me, they seem completely uneducated, unschooled, and just plain dumb. I don't want to listen to someone who can't back up their claim. I don't want to listen to someone who has no weight to their words. And I don't want to listen to someone who has no proof and even goes against proof. Transgenders say that gender is fixed from the moment a child can speak and think, meaning throughout life. And here scientists say that they partially agree because gender identity is fixed, but not in children, only in adults. Gender identity is flexible in children because they are still developing and they mimic what they see and hear. Whatever they are taught, they believe. For example, my sister used to like to trick me when I was a kid, and we were walking on the sidewalk once and there was a number engraved into the cement, 1490 something I think, but it was the 1400s. And my sister said that if I stepped on that number, I would be transported back to that time. I believed her with every fiber of my being. I was ready for an adventure and I was contemplating stepping on that number. When I finally gave in and stepped on that number, believing that it would be true, nothing happened. So I went to her and I told her that it didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Because she said that it would happen. I was waiting for something magical. I was waiting for my transportation to the 1400s. I was completely devastated that I did not get transported back in time. Children believe anything. They are shapeable into anything that you want them to be shaped into. Their minds are gullible. So of course, if you're going to throw this transgender, multigender acceptance thing in front of them, they are going to absolutely believe what you say. And they're going to believe it with every fiber of their being because they don't know any better. This is bad teaching. Colleges are filled with snowflakes and marshmallows who need safe zones because they feel offended and oppressed. Black kids from when I grew up who didn't know about this racist stuff now cry racism at every corner, at every moment, about everything. Because this is what they have been taught. A study was done with 139 gender dysphoric boys. Out of that 139, 122 or 88% desisted. This means they went back to being normal, real boys as they grew. They were subjected to this gender thing theory when they were children, but when they got older, they went back to their natural state. And again, here is the report. I won't go over the whole thing, but it also concludes this in the abstract. If you want the short of it, if not, just read the whole thing. Going back to the article, it says transgender activists and their allies have branded desistance as a myth, but ignoring this has serious consequences, especially medically. As it says below, it means some transgender children will needlessly undergo biomedical interventions such as hormone treatments. In one 2011 study of 25 gender dysphoric children, 11 desisted. Of the desisters, 2 of them had transitioned physically with surgery and hormones or whatever, and regretted it. In this article, it's dangerous and wrong to tell all children they're gender fluid. This creep, Maria Miller, says there's no need for gender categories on passports, driver's license, or other official forms because gender is irrelevant. We should be looking at ways of trying to strip back talking about gender, she says. But it's people like her and her committee who have made it a frontline issue, meaning that she's blowing it up in our faces. In 2004, Parliament passed the Gender Recognition Act. In 2010, the Equality Act made gender reassignment a protected characteristic. In 2011, the government published its Advancing Transgender Equality Action Plan. The NHS has a National Clinical Reference Group for Gender Identity Services. The National Police Chiefs Council has a National Policing Lead on Transgender. Last November, the Department for Education flew the transgender flag to mark the Transgender Day of Remembrance. I added this here to show you the obsession that politics has in all of this. It's in the media so much because it's now made to be a political and civil rights thing. It's an obsession. Period. But here's where the stupidity shows again. So Miller wants to get rid of passports and documents that show whatever gender you are. But this article continues to say that if she does that, it would deprive these multigenders the ability to show their new gender on their passports and documents and things, which is actually taking away from what she is trying to add. So once again, makes no sense. And this article puts it perfectly. Gender politics is all about subjective feelings. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it's all subjective. It has nothing to do with fairness or equality. They claim acceptance and equality, but if you're not on their agenda and if you don't agree with what they say, you are a bigot and a racist. And the definition of oppression, even though they don't know what oppression is, gender fluidity itself creates victims. Professor Paul McHugh is the former chief psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins Hospital in the US. In the 1960s, this pioneered sex reassignment surgery, but subsequently abandoned it because of the problems it left in its wake. Most young boys and girls who seek sex reassignment have psychosocial issues and presume that such treatment will resolve them. The grim fact is that most of these youngsters do not find therapists willing to assess and guide them in ways that permit them to work out their conflicts and correct their assumptions. Rather, they and their families find only gender counselors who encourage them in their sexual misassumptions. In addition, Miller's committee wants to get rid of the medicalized approach because it runs contrary to the dignity and personal autonomy of trans people. So they don't care about the physical implications and the seriousness that they're causing to their minds and bodies. They would rather do away with this whole medical stuff and let trans people and multigender people just run wild, because that is the only effective way of helping them. And as far as attempted suicide goes and depression, they blame transphobia for driving them into despair. And the innocent targets of these morons are children because their minds are easily manipulated. So how does this affect our tax dollars? I threw this in here because I also wanted to show how this affects not only the person who's making the decision, but the nation as a whole. The Health and Human Services issued final non-discrimination in health programs and activities rule. That's section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. And even as of 2019, the Affordable Care Act is still in place. The one change is that the penalty for not having insurance at all has been taken out, thank God, by Donald Trump. So healthy people who don't have insurance and don't want it no longer have to worry about paying this penalty on their taxes. But this section 1557 prohibits discrimination on every level. It also applies to any health program or activity, any part of which receives funding from the Department of Health and Human Services, like hospitals that accept Medicare or doctors who receive Medicaid payments. In this article, this transgender wanted surgery and was very happy about it, but it goes on to say, by making it clear that state Medicaid programs could not refuse to pay for a health care service simply because the beneficiary is transgender, and suggesting greater federal attention to the matter, the Section 1557 rule push states to be more upfront about coverage specifics. The only one good thing that came out of this was President Donald Trump, who spoke up and said that this would cause an economic burden because these are now extra expenses that really don't need to exist. On transequality.org, this talks about taxes and medical care. It is now tax deductible and they are covered. You could read this yourselves. Here it just talks about how transgenders are not excluded in medical coverage. And if they are denied coverage by insurance, they could take it up with the courts, and this is now a legal matter. And in case you guys didn't know, Medicare is funded by the Social Security Administration, which means it's funded by taxpayers, which means it is us. So even those who do not want to fund someone's surgery to change from a guy to a girl or a girl to a guy, you are still forcibly paying this whether you like it or not. These are cost estimates. It's about $140,000 to transition from male to female and $124,000 to transition from female to male. These are just estimates. These are more stats, but just to give you an idea, male to female gender reassignment surgery market valued at $115.5 million in 2017. I could think of many places that that money could have gone to other than transgender surgeries. Okay, this is where we get real, because anyone denying, especially the professional morons from earlier, denying that medical anything has nothing to do with gender, you are very, very wrong. Because no matter what gender you think you are or want to be, there's always going to be guy problems, there's always going to be girl problems, and here they are. These are diseases specific to males. Transgenders may fight against it because they get the surgeries, but those who don't do surgeries because they can't afford it or don't want to, they will still encounter this. You can read this yourself. It's very short, but some of them are male pattern baldness, prostate cancer, Alport syndrome, and so on. When it comes to health, you just cannot lie about this. You have to tell the truth because it could mean your life in the end. And that's what these people don't understand. It forces hospitals and doctors and nurses to cooperate with them by force, and it's just become a struggle because this is not realistic or safe. Female-specific diseases, you can read this yourself again. It's this short, but breast and ovarian cancer, that's definitely at the top of the list. In my pharmacology book, creatinine clearance varies with age and gender. You can't lie about your gender when you go into a hospital because this can change the outcome of your care. Creatinine is a waste product that is filtered through the kidneys. Lie about your gender, it gives hospital staff the wrong creatinine levels, and kidney failure will be the least of your worries. Gender-specific herbs. These are herbs that guys would not take for hormones. Genetics play a significant role in alcoholism and nicotine use, and that there are significant gender differences in drug abuse risk, and it goes on to describe it. When it comes to food and what the body needs, both males and females specifically have a recommended dietary allowance, and it is specific to gender. Women lose more blood, they get anemic quicker, they need more iron. Guys cannot have the same level of iron, or protein, or even calcium. Bevacizumab, which is Avastin, is a chemotherapy drug. Steady levels are usually reached about 100 days. Clearance varies with weight and gender, with men clearing the drug faster than women. But there's more. This is posted on the Cigna website. Health concerns for transgender people. Hormones. If you're a transgender woman, ask about estrogen and blood clots, swelling, high or low blood pressure, and high blood sugar. If you're a transgender man, ask about blood tests. You'll need these to be sure your testosterone dosage is safe. In heart health, transgender people may be at greater risk for a heart attack and stroke. This is due to hormone use, along with cigarette smoking, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Cancer. It's possible, though very rare, to develop cancer due to hormone treatment. It's also possible to develop certain cancers if your sex organs haven't been removed. STDs. STDs run high in non-heterosexual groups. Alcohol and tobacco. Drinking too much can damage your liver or other organs. Transgender people smoke cigarettes. Many, but not all. This raises their risk of heart and lung disease, especially when taking hormones. Depression. Sadness and depression is common among transgender people, both before and after transition. If you're depressed, you may struggle to feel happy, you might make bad choices or harm yourself. Surgery will not complete these people. Depression is not from not being accepted. It's because there was a deeper mental problem there before. Injectable silicone. Transgender women want to look feminine and beautiful without having to wait for the effect of estrogen. So they'll get cheap ones in cheap places that move around, cause tissue scarring, share needles that have hepatitis or HIV. From the University of Rochester Medical Center, health issues for gay, lesbian, and transgenders. Hormone issues, blood clots, dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, liver damage, low or high blood pressure, cancer, mental health issues, STDs, substance abuse, heart disease, obesity, and the most common one is HIV. Pause and read this. I'm not going to go over this. Here are stats from 2016. Look at the incredible difference. Those who are gay or bisexual or anything else other than heterosexuals have the highest numbers of HIV compared to those who are heterosexuals. I can definitely explain to you why that is, but it would be very graphic, and then I would have to put an age restriction on this video. In maternal child nursing, TTN happens right after birth. Risk factors include cesarean birth without labor, precipitous delivery, and male gender. Weight, height, head circumference, body fat need to be compared with average gender after birth. You can't say that your kid is cisgender or two-spirit or fish because the doctors and nurses have to go by the parameters set to ensure that the baby is healthy, which only includes male and female. Breast cancer develops in 1 in 8 women in the United States. Besides gender, the greatest risk factors are advancing age and prior history of breast cancer. You can't raise kids as any other gender except male or female because they have specific needs. They must have checkups according to their needs, and those checkups must match the parameters set for male and female. Nutritional differences between teenage girls and boys. Calorie requirements. Teen boys are physically bigger, their calorie needs are higher. With protein, the needs of teenage boys are higher. Dietary fat. Teen boys require more calories, so total fat needs are higher too. Vitamins and minerals. Most are the same except for iron. Girls need it more because of loss of blood. If they don't have enough iron, they get anemic and bad things will happen. This is a chart showing statistics of how rare birth defects are. When it comes to arguing that people are born this way, multigenders really need to find a better argument. And this is not a mental issue, it's just a physical issue with these people. In a perfect world, I can argue that you can't think this way or be this way because God said so. But in a perfect world, people wouldn't think this way and be this way, and I wouldn't need to use that argument, which will be the ultimate argument to win everything. Homosexual behavior has been observed in the animal kingdom, but it's usually an alpha male trying to dominate a weaker male to demonstrate who is in charge. This article puts it very nicely. Homosexuality among animals in nature is not a lifestyle choice. Animals do not operate within any moral context and do not sin, end quote. This is based on a biblical point of view. People have choices and their choices are a lifestyle choice. Animals don't have a conscience like we do, and they don't make moral choices. So we cannot take our example from animals. The example this gives is that some animals eat their young, but that doesn't mean that it's okay for humans to be cannibals. Dogs eat their own vomit. Does that mean that we should do that too? And then some insects devour their partners after mating. But that can't be used as an example for us either. These are some of the medications used for transitioning. Testosterone, it increases facial and body hair growth. It thickens bone structure. Adverse effects are blood pressure, higher blood pressure, polycythemia, which is too many red blood cells, a really bad lipid profile, so your cholesterol is going to be messed up, higher glucose, acne, and so on. Finasteride, this claims that it's for baldness. Anti-androgens like spironolactone is another drug. This is my drug handbook, so I looked these up. Look at how many adverse reactions there are. It covers almost every body system. Well, not every, but a lot of the body systems. Not to mention interaction with other drugs. It affects lab test results like increasing sodium and potassium. It decreases thyroxine binding globulin. It increases red blood cells. It can cause abnormal glucose tolerance test results. DVTs and PEs have been reported in patients using testosterone products. DVT is deep vein thrombosis and a PE is pulmonary embolism. That can lead to death. Finasteride as well has effects on lab tests, interactions and contraindications. It can increase the risk of high-grade prostate cancer. You can read the rest for yourself. Aldactone even has a black box warning. Avoid unnecessary use. I would say transitioning to anything is unnecessary use. You can get edema due to heart failure, hypokalemia because of diuretic use, cirrhosis. Then there's still the adverse reactions and interactions, and so on. No matter how much you alter your body on the inside, you will still have the strength of a male or a female. You can read this for yourself. It compares body sizes. Even with a comparable body size between a male and a female, males have greater BMC and BMD at the hip and distal tibia and greater tibial cortical thickness. That's bone mineral density. The skeletal muscles of men are faster and render higher maximum output compared to women's skeletal muscles, but women have the advantage of recovering faster and being more fatigue resistant. The muscle tissues are the same, but the fibers are different, depending on genetics and their regular activities. Men have more skeletal muscle mass compared to women. This is also the reason why men tend to be stronger. This report goes into great detail about this. I definitely recommend looking into this if you want to know more. I added this in here just to show you guys just how unfair it is for guys who go onto girls' teams in athletics and call themselves girls and they want to be recognized as such, but they dominate in these sports. It truly, truly is unfair. No matter how many hormones they take or how skinny they get, they're still going to be broader and bigger because of their bone size and density. This is Milo Yiannopoulos. The biggest contradiction to ever walk the earth. Although he's gay, I like him because he's honest with himself and he's honest with everyone else. He doesn't blame anyone for anything. He's direct and forward and sometimes a little bit too much.
When the left tells you people are born this way, that was an invention. We came up with that in the 90s and in the 80s to get at the religious right, who were saying, you know, love the sinner but hate the sin. So the gay lobby were like, well, what if we're like women or blacks? What if we don't have a choice? That makes them bigots. So they came up with this born this way thing, which really has no basis in science at all. All the science suggests that it's a mixture of nature and nurture. My own attitude to this has always been, we are all messy, complicated people. And sometimes we're in pain, and sometimes we're confused, and sometimes we don't know what we want. The progressive left insists that we acknowledge their bizarre, complex ways of describing themselves. They're genderqueer, polyamorous, whatever. But if you say you're a gay Catholic, or a gay conservative, suddenly their heads explode. I think if I were to take a straight pill, my career would be over. But I think I probably would, and I'll tell you why. And I've never really heard this from any other gay people, but it always seems very obvious to me. It's not about bigotry or homophobia. Because we could live in a perfect society, and in many ways we pretty much do, you know, where people are not discriminated against the basis of their sexuality. But for me, and I'm sorry for some of this is going to be TMI for some of you. For me, not being able to create a child with a person you love, that gets you, you know? Like, you notice that. It's like, that's, oh, okay. And at some point, when I'm tired of triggering special snowflakes on campuses, and... yeah, well, no, thank you. No, look, I do it for you. I do it for you. At some point, I'm going to get tired of that, and I might quite like a little Milo. And, you know, under normal mechanics, that's not possible. And for that reason, I think I would take the pill, yeah. And I think it's a fairly... I don't find that... You know, the left, of course, if you have any even slightly nuanced position on your own identity, they will call you self-loathing. Well, I think it's fairly obvious I don't hate myself. I don't hate anything about myself. But that doesn't mean... That doesn't mean that if I didn't think about it carefully, I might not choose a different path. Unfortunately, I think at this stage, I'm probably locked in.
There was a lot more I wish I could have said in this video, but it was getting way too long already, and I even condensed it. I just made a small dent in what I wanted to say. This is just a short of it, and this video is already long. I hope that something was at least helpful to anyone looking for information, but I do want to close with this. If you guys haven't seen my intro video, I do say that I take a biblical perspective, and I just want to say that anything other than male or female, man or woman, is not right in God's eyes and goes against his design. And anyone who argues that they are born this way failed that argument already, because God doesn't create people in a way he doesn't like in order to cast them aside. He created us with free will and a mind of our own, and we make our own choices. Love me, hate me, that's just the way it is.
Educate yourself!